The international situation just escalated real quick when, off the coast of Iceland, U.S. military forces launched a massive operation targeting what they call the shadow fleet of Russia, Venezuela, and Iran-sanctioned oil tankers. This operation led to a tense standoff between a Russian nuclear attack submarine and a U.S. Navy SEAL team in the North Atlantic region. And it didn't stop there, because since the start of this year, other Western nations like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Estonia have also jumped into a global campaign to crack down on illegal oil tankers by intercepting and boarding them for inspections. Drop a comment with the word 1 if you're backing the US, or 2 if you're siding with Venezuela. This shadow fleet is a huge covert network that Russia has poured billions of dollars into to keep exporting oil to customers despite Western sanctions. To give you a clearer picture, this fleet currently accounts for nearly 20% of the world's oil tanker capacity. So why are Western nations willing to risk direct confrontation over these old, rusty ships in the shadow fleet? 2 weeks ago, a sanctioned tanker named Bella 1 tried to break through a U.S. Navy blockade off the coast of Venezuela. A U.S. Coast Guard Legend-class cutter chased it down hard and ordered the ship to stop via radio, but the sanctioned vessel refused to comply, turning it into a high-seas chase like something out of a highway pursuit. The Russian government demanded that the U.S. stop tracking the ship, but the Americans weren't having it. The chase went on, and as Bella 1 fled from U.S. forces, it moved from the Caribbean Sea into the Atlantic Ocean. During the escape, the crew on board quickly renamed the ship to Mariana, kinda like swapping out license plates while being chased. They even painted a crude Russian flag on the ship's hull. It ain't a masterpiece, but this move signaled that the ship now claims official protection from Moscow. This is shocking because, up until now, the main purpose of the Shadow Fleet was to help Russia maintain plausible deniability. Shell companies were used to hide ties to Russia through paperwork so complicated it's hard to unravel. But now, openly flying the Russian flag shows they believe U.S. forces will back off due to the risk of a major geopolitical incident if they seize an officially Russian-flagged oil tanker, something that's never happened before. This move has complicated U.S. efforts to seize the ship, because as retired Admiral Kenny put it, once a ship is legally registered under the Russian flag, it's protected by that national flag under international law. This puts the U.S. military in direct confrontation with the Russian government and military. After that, Russia deployed an ALA-class nuclear attack submarine along with surface warships to escort the fleeing Bella 1 to safety. The deadly torpedoes on the submarine were sent as a message to intimidate U.S. forces and deter any seizure. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter was no match for the Russian submarine and warships, forcing them to wait for backup from the U.S. military. But how can backup arrive in time in the middle of the Atlantic, far from any base? U.S. strategists came up with the idea of deploying P-8 Poseidon anti-submarine aircraft from friendly air bases in the United Kingdom to patrol the skies over the area. These planes dropped dozens of sonar buoys into the ocean to locate the Russian submarine, then could launch lightweight Mark 54 torpedoes from the air. These torpedoes would plunge into the water and hunt the submarine using active and passive sonar. For extra safety, the U.S. also deployed AC-130J gunships equipped with autocannons, heavy artillery, and missiles, a massive show of force. This is a power standoff unlike anything many of us have seen in our lifetimes. Billions of dollars worth of military hardware are converging on a single point in the Atlantic, all over an old, rusty, empty oil tanker. From the U.S. perspective, this is necessary because the entire credibility of the blockade operation is at stake. Later, the U.S. sent a transport plane carrying the Night Stalkers unit from the Army's Telluride Regiment, SOAR, and a Navy SEAL team to the United Kingdom. Little Bird helicopters were loaded onto ships and headed out to sea to intercept the illegal Russian-flagged tanker. The United Kingdom also supported the U.S. by providing aerial surveillance and naval support vessels. The SEAL team boarded the ship once called Bella 1, quickly taking control of the deck and detaining several Russian crew members. These sailors are expected to face charges in the U.S. The fact that U.S. forces directly acted against a ship registered under Moscow's name is almost unprecedented. But what's even more striking is that the Russian Navy didn't respond and instead retreated. The weird thing is, Bella 1 is reportedly not even carrying oil, which has people asking, so what's in the cargo hold? Could it be black market weapons from Russia meant for Maduro? Or is there just nothing at all? Maritime intelligence analyst Michelle Wise-Brockman, an expert on the Shadow Fleet, said, "There's a blurring line between commercial and military transport in the Shadow Fleet. What we're seeing now is a trend that's only emerged in the last 6 to 7 months." The British government stated their involvement isn't about Venezuela, but mainly part of a broader campaign to suppress Russia's Shadow Fleet. A British official affirmed, "We're ramping up our response against shadow ships, and will keep doing so." The British government reiterated that their participation isn't tied to Venezuela but is primarily part of a wide-ranging effort to crack down on Russia's Shadow Fleet. A British official stressed, "We're stepping up our response against shadow ships, and will continue to do so." The UK Defence Minister called disrupting and weakening Russia's Shadow Fleet a top priority. UK Cabinet Minister Pat McFadden emphasized, "The international community must recognize that we're operating in a changed world, where hard power is increasingly used to achieve national objectives." What's noteworthy is that Bella 1 was initially sanctioned in 2024 for links to Hezbollah and Iran's Quds Force. This incident isn't directly tied to Russian oil, but to understand why Moscow would risk its military reputation over a rusty ship, we need to look at the bigger strategic picture. The so-called Shadow Fleet of sanctioned oil tankers has become a critical strategic asset for Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. Also known as the Ghost Fleet or Dark Fleet, it includes about 500 oil tankers and 500 support vessels, forming a force of up to 1,000 ships operating under fake national flags to evade Western sanctions. Russia has invested in this fleet since 2022 to sustain oil exports, their main revenue source since launching military operations in Ukraine. This directly funds the war in Ukraine and Russia's ability to maintain military campaigns. To grasp the fleet's importance, it handles up to 60% of Russia's seaborne oil exports, bringing in about $100 billion annually, a figure even larger than the total aid European countries have provided to Ukraine since the conflict began. The Shadow Fleet has become a lifeline for Venezuela, Iran, and Russia. So what routes do these ships usually take? Most of the Shadow Fleet's cargo starts at Russian oil export hubs like Primorsk, with crude oil shipped west and south. The ships leave the Black Sea or Mediterranean gateways, passing through the Bosphorus Strait to reach southern and global markets. Additionally, some ships depart from Russia's eastern ports near the Pacific, around Vladivostok, to deliver to Asia via the Suez Canal. They conduct ship-to-ship transfers off the Red Sea to launder the oil's origin by mixing illegal oil with legal oil to hide its source. Recently, these ships have increasingly used the Arctic route to transport oil to China. That's why, in 2025, we've seen high-profile global seizures of Russian oil tankers. French boarding teams took control of a Russian tanker. Estonian forces detained a crew, while the Russian military sent fighter jets to help other sanctioned ships break through blockades and escape. The Russian military has also ramped up escorts with warships and fighter jets. Finland seized the Russian ship Eagle S, believed to be part of an operation to cut undersea cables. All these events directly threaten Russia's ability to wage war. The question is, how far is Moscow willing to go to protect this fleet? Every action has a reaction, and right now, we're seeing the militarization of Russia's Shadow Fleet. Swedish Naval Operations Commander Marco Pekovic noted, Russia's naval presence has become more permanent and visible in several Baltic Sea areas to support the Shadow Fleet. Venezuelan and Russian officials have started placing armed military personnel on oil tankers and disguising them. They're even discussing equipping these ships with portable Igla air defense systems. Strategies to suppress the Shadow Fleet are being considered in Washington as the RAND Corporation, a prominent U.S. policy research institute, has proposed strategies to seize these ships. Some British and American officials hint that this is part of a coordinated effort to pressure President Putin to come to the negotiating table. Former U.S. Ambassador to Brussels Gordon Sland commented, "This way, the U.S. increases pressure on the economies of Iran, Russia, and Venezuela until the desired outcome is achieved." However, seizing oil tankers is also seen as a way for the U.S. to demonstrate full control over Venezuela's oil supply. Some suggest this move is to enforce a deal for 50 million barrels of oil that the US claims Venezuela committed to. Drop a comment with the word 1 if you're backing the US, or 2 if you're siding with Venezuela.